Doing it. Okay. Cool, everybody. Yeah, I'm Kasper. Let's see where we want to start here. I figured we'd just keep it fairly loose and informal since it's a little bit of a smaller event. Yeah, exactly. I like what you did with it too. It's just let's just see kind of where we get to it, and then we'll sort of figure it out as we go. So I think it was interesting because I didn't know what Rado was going to talk about at first, but it seems like it might actually segue quite a lot with what it is I'm talking about. So that was kind of interesting. But basically, what I've been exploring is something similar to what Rado was talking about with finding some potentially missing parts in Rails or just exploring some ideas and putting them into gems. So I got two things we're going to try to look at today. One is a little bit larger, that's a little bit for later. And then some use cases that people are starting to use it and applying a little bit. So that's sort of the overall gist of it. Cool? Okay, yeah, okay, all right. Cool. So the first one is called Activator Associated Object. Let's see, is this font size okay? Maybe we should do this actually. And then bump it up a little bit. A little better? Yeah. Okay, cool. So usually when people are trying to organize the Rails apps, it's either like doing a bunch of service objects, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is a replacement for any of that. It's kind of a complementary thing. But I had this idea to, I was going to help out some code at some point. Let's see when we want to do that. But basically the idea was to see if there's a gap where, because I feel like there's so much talk about what service objects are and what they look like and so forth. And I just felt like there was a need for, well, I had an idea that I wanted to see if I could do something a little bit different that I hadn't seen quite before. And it's still complementary. Basically the idea was to sort of find some language that would make it easier for people to sort of spot collaborator objects within their active record, so all the logic wouldn't just pool there. So for instance, Garrett, who's working on Flipper, he's been using this. They've just rebuilt their, they did a whole billing update. Let's see, maybe also needs to be bumped up a little bit, okay. But basically, yeah, so he's quoting here the README that I'm sort of talking about, where typically Rails applications get end up with models that get way too big, and so far the response has been to sort of service objects solely. But sometimes then you can have an app services that then it can also turn into another junk drawer that doesn't necessarily help you build and make concepts for your domain model. So in this library, I'm trying to take that part head on, where these associated objects are kind of a new domain concept. It's kind of a context object similar to what Rado was showing with both the form objects and so forth and query objects and all that stuff. And it's sort of meant to help you tease out these collaborator objects, so-called. So Flipper's been using it for they're doing this like pro version, and they rewrote their whole billing engine and whatnot. So it's kind of easy to see once Garrett has a whole bunch of ideas for what it is. So he was actually doing something kind of similar to what the library ends up cleaning up a little bit, where he would have, an account model, and then it would have these poros essentially that he would then inject self into. So the account would be passed in, and then he would have a nested record in here as well. And then you would take the account and you can do stuff with that essentially for calculating something related to seats in this case for their billing stuff. And so my gem was sort of something I did like 2 years ago, but it kind of mirrors some of this stuff where instead now you can have a has object declaration, and you just inherit from this active record associated object. And so the idea is that you're starting to have a new name. Once you start knowing what these things kind of look and feel like, suddenly it becomes easier for you to decompose new features when you know what this does. Let's see this a little bit more. So it's ultimately meant to feel Rails-like, so it's like almost feel like it's built in already. It mirrors a little bit of what has one and has many does, where you just have this extra way to like sidecars or extract certain logic so it's not all grouped into the same model. Cool, let's see, I want to jump into a little bit more. And there's a bunch of automatic stuff, but that's easier once we get into what the code looks like. I just wanted to show, yeah, so basically Garrett used to have stuff like this where they have these trial expired and so forth, but now you can group it around a specific model, or basically this poro object that can then group some of that functionality. Let's see, I think he's showing a little bit what it actually looks like. Same thing with these seats again. Again, all this pricing stuff, they also had a bunch of stuff that's now grouped into one object instead of being all on the account. Let's see, he's finding, okay, I don't think it was in here then, but I'll show some other stuff then. Let's see, do I want to go to this or this? Okay, let's go to some of the source code where I've written some stuff. So basically what I'm trying to show here is the idea I had was since you can do, let's do the code part actually. Let's jump. Oh, it's because it's, yeah, okay. Do that and then do this, I think. So basically what I was thinking of when I was writing this was, since you can do this kind of stuff with active record, where you can then do post.find with an ID and then get a post back, I was kind of thinking, what if you could do like something like this, where you then put in a poro instead. So this is like this would just be an object that's not stored in a database, but because it's nested within this active record namespace, you could actually find it in a database. And then you could do some interesting stuff with that. So for instance, when you do something like an active job thing where you then put in the post, what it'll do in the background is actually called to global ID. And then that will serialize into, I think it looks sort of like this, where it has an app something and then a post and it has the ID. But then this post publisher poro could actually do similar, where we could just do the same namespace and then it could also be found. So we could pass a poro directly to a job, for instance. So that was sort of the initial gist of the idea, just to see if that would make sense and what that may unlock later down the line. So yeah, so the primary thing was that namespacing, so you get a little bit more organization out of the box. And then some of these extra features kind of to see what that would look like. Let's see, do we want to jump into the read? I think I kind of like it more in the browser. Hold on, where are we at? Here. So yeah, you make that has object declaration, and then you must namespace it. So this would be app models post/publisher. And then there's some tricky bits internally for how it actually is like set up, because there's modern versions of Ruby has this thing called object shapes, which is when you initialize an instance variable in a different order, you create a new object shape internally, so it ends up consuming more memory. So you have to be careful now when you assign a new instance variable, because they're order dependent. So we're doing this thing where we basically have a hash internally that we then set somewhere. So that's the reason for that. Let's see, what else? And then once you have these objects, you can also, there's some light syntactic sugar involved where you can then do a transaction, but that just delegates to the post. But so in this case, because we're nesting with on the post, we have access to a local post method essentially. So you can then interact with the object, and hopefully that clarifies how this extra, more scoped domain concept is interacting with the parent model essentially. Let's see, and then again, I'm mentioning Flipper here. This is the article we just looked at, and they have another one for that stuff. Our generator as well. Here's some more advanced stuff where I'm not necessarily making a comment on whether or not people should use callbacks or not. It was just like, this is fairly easy to relay callbacks onto this object where you could then interact more, basically. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Let's see, the active record. So another feature I was curious to explore was, you see this a lot in Rails apps, at least in some apps, where you're making this concern that you then include, and you do a bunch of this integration stuff where you could still have the declaration in here, but maybe you'd want some extra methods that interact with that, but you want to keep all that scoped into one concern, for instance, so it's sort of nested there. But if you start using these associated objects, suddenly you got the logic split out from both the concern, the wrapping concern, and then the associated object, which in some ways is nicer because you get some of the logic extracted out, so it's not just all mingled in together in that one concern, so that's not like a huge mess essentially. But what we've been trying to explore is then, what if we then now move the integration part into this class as well, so you still just have one file, and then when you do, when you do this kind of has object, we'll go in the background and load the class immediately, so we fire this block where you can then extend the object itself. So the piece here is this was kind of easy enough to write. Like, this is just a delegation around post.classEval. So it was not super difficult to add this kind of feature. And then it's kind of up to people whether or not they want to use it or whatnot. Oh yeah, I'm also saying it here, actually, I'm calling it out, that it's classEval and so forth. So let's see, what else do you want to, yeah, and then I'm just mentioning you don't have to know all this stuff, like how to use class methods and like this included do, and you have to extend this stuff. With the other version, you can kind of just do it in one go because it's just in the class itself that it's evaluated, which makes sense for if you have concerns that are just for one model. It's a little bit different, you want to share between them. But so let's see, anything else I want to show in this README here? some people that have been using it. Let's see, testing it. And testing can also be split out into the separate file then, where you're then still relying on that paired actor record, but then you can still get at this like associated object essentially. And here's the what I was talking about with the global ID integration, which is how ActiveJob both serializes objects and finds them again for jobs. And then we can pass in a poro essentially, because it's not stored in a database, it's just connected to that via that namespace and reusing the same ID essentially to be considered unique. Let's see, what else do I want to show here? And there's some more stuff, but that's kind of for later, spare some writing. And then I'm kind of using the same thing to get an extra, basically what I'm trying to do with this stuff too is also, once you start following this pattern, I kind of want to have more bang for my buck if I'm using a pattern where then by just following this kind of convention, suddenly I get some extra features out of the box, which in this case could be something like credits here, which credits was a thing I wrote, extracted from a job I had where we're using Redis to store some kind of ephemeral data in a way, and then there was some logic that started to show up where that was kind of coming together in a way that was like these specific types in there. But then credits works off of also some keys essentially. So I'm kind of using the same ID trick to also support this out of the box. So you can have like automatic support for credits because it has a bunch of different types that you can then store data with. Again, if you want to use it. Let's see, namespace models. Okay, and how do we do that? So, okay, fair enough. Cool. Let's try to dive into the code itself because it's actually not too bad, I don't think. Let's see, just click into the lib folder. We have a generator in here that makes it a little bit easier to get set up. So you can do Rails generate associated and you pass in the name. Let's see, and then we're just here in this actor record. And then with an associated object, we got, so it's not too bad, but there is some metaprogramming in here. Basically what I'm doing is this is a Ruby built-in hook where when you inherit from this actor record associated object, we set up a whole bunch of this like extra logic where I'm both requiring that you're inheriting, that you're an actor record you're associating with. And then we're doing some other tricks to kind of both figure out what's the attribute name. So in that case where you had the post publisher, it would be publisher underscore, it would just be lowercase, and record class would be the post and so forth. And here's the part I was talking about with that extension that is just to wrap around this a class eval essentially. And then I'm using, this is maybe where, again, some of this was 2 years ago, and it's kind of, maybe I shouldn't have used method missing to do some of this, but it kind of worked, so I just sort of went with it. But basically the gist of this is how we're supporting global ID, where we got both where support and find support, which is what's required to make that work. Where I'm supering in here to sort of kick back up if our record class we can't forward. So this could be where, for instance. So I'm also technically supporting post publisher dot where for global ID essentially to work. And so what we do is we then forward that method to the post, and then we extract the publisher from that. Essentially, that's kind of what this logic is doing. If it's an array, we just loop over it and extract all of them, because you could find multiple, for instance, or we just send it directly to the one version. So that's kind of what's going on. And then internally, we're also doing, I'm just using a generally named record, which means that I can write code on my end that just refers to record if I need to in my implementation. But then up here, we're doing this alias method, which is how you get that post alias. So we're just aliasing to that record. So it makes it easier so I don't have to generate a bunch of extra code, but it can just be one alias method call, so it works on the client side when they're inheriting from it. Cool. Makes sense so far? I don't know if I'm going too fast. Cool, okay. Let's see, and then we do an equals check here for a reason I don't remember why I implemented that, but so where?
So you're dedicating post published where, for example.
Yes.
But you're only extracting the values that are related to the publisher, right?
Yeah. So it's tricky. It's sort of embedded in here. Let's see. Maybe we should take and translate this. Let's see if we do this, and then where's the code at? Here, and then let me do this. We'll go back and show this. The alignment here. Cool. So the record class, that's just a post. And method here, let's say, well, I'm just going to do it here. Anything else? Oh, okay. Where, for instance, and then, so if the post doesn't respond to where, which it does, otherwise we'd super, but this could be, it could be a different method that it doesn't respond to or whatnot. Just so the method missing isn't too scattershot, because that's usually the issue where you miss something and then suddenly you get a bunch of weird errors. So that's what the check is for. But in this case, it would. So we try to then send where to it, and then we'd grab the value from that, and then we'd send this attribute name, which is then the publisher. Oh, headers in here. And so I'm trying to guard against, because this could also be find, which then will return a single element. So I'm trying to guard against both, which is like, if you return something in response to each, which where will do, then I'm just going to map over that collection and grab all of them out of it. Because you can do, with global ID, you can basically find many, or locate many, I think it's called.
And this can also, in this way, you also work with calls. Like let's say you have
Yes.
post visible, you can say
Yeah.
post publisher visible.
Yeah, I think that's also what I do. Well, I don't know if I support it, because I think that's going to try to extract it immediately. But I didn't add full support for that, because I just wanted to wear, but I think that was the idea
It
to,
would still work because like the
Yeah.
record would still respond to visible.
Yeah.
And the visible would be called.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I can't remember if I worked on trying that, yeah. But yeah, the reason I'm supporting where is because you can also do this locate many, so you could serialize these porters again into global IDs, and then pull them back out for somewhere if you want to put them somewhere else or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
also, I
yeah.
think locate many actually uses like find with array because it returns them in the same order. So it would also.
Yeah, there's also something with that, yeah.
Yeah. So that's.
It used to use where, I think there's something where you can do like ignore missing, where you can pass this and then it'll use where, but if you don't, it'll use find and then it'll erase if it can't, something like that. I don't remember.
Like I think, yeah, because it always returns them in the same order.
Yeah.
Because that sometimes can be important.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And the each would handle that case because even if you do find can return an array.
Yes, yeah. And then we'll just, return the array and then we can just loop over what's in that order. Yeah.
Maybe this map can be a bit dangerous if your scope is like really
Right.
big.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Yeah, you have to be careful with that. So that's why it's not, people aren't necessarily using it this way because this is more an integration part for just passing them into jobs and so forth. But I wanted to have some indicator of potentially being able to use it like that.
Post publisher will be this publisher object.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So in this case, in this method, missing would be on this publisher, like no, it'd actually be on the class. So I guess you could do, what is it you could do, like a publisher? Like you could define it like that, but yeah. Yeah, so it's a little tricky, some of this integration work, but it sets up all of this conventional stuff, so it's easier to, sort of works. You just have to inherit from an object, you just have the namespace, and then you're kind of done, and you get these extra features out of it.
Yeah, maybe use like lazy enum for the map. This can solve your performance problem.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, you could do something like that, yeah. But yeah, I don't know if people are going to be using it, so I haven't implemented that yet for sure for right now. I just wanted it to work, but you're right, could do. And then the other side of it is then having this, let's see here, we have this has object declaration. So one other thing I tend to do when I'm writing gems, I just try to play around with new Ruby features. Well, refinements is not a new Ruby feature, but I haven't really used them before. Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, playing around with different syntax. Gennady, we talked about this earlier, right? Was it Alexander that was like a...
Yeah, I think the association activity of the blocks.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, because this would actually not work if we do do end, because then the block associates with using.
Yes, exactly.
But then if you use... Yeah. But if you use the curly braces, it'll associate to module.new, so it's a trick to do it on like one line. So I like this kind of weird stuff, just like, oh, this works now, and then we'll just...
if not then, else on same line, I just put extend self after the module definition, which...
So you mean where? Like this, was this what you mean? Yeah, that's also kind of weird, but it's just fun to do. I've also, been liking using like the endless method definitions. Yeah. At first I really didn't like them, but I've just been forcing myself to use them more and more to see what it feels like, and I'm kind of starting to really like them. So just to play around with it, see how it feels, essentially. Let's see what else. And so this is kind of overkill to define like an extra method on to like on both. Yeah, so a lot of stuff is happening here, but it was just I just wanted it. But basically what it is we can insert these names. So what that would be is like you have has object, what was it like? It could be publisher, it could be like seat. So you have multiple, and you loop over each of these symbols in here, and for each of them you yield to this block where you then return a string that then gets concatenated, and then you do. So that's what's happening up here. So another thing, first I have to grab the location so you can point back to where the method is defined. This is also some trickery that you're not used to if you're just writing apps, but in library code, I want to, if you do, so what is it like? If you do post.instance method publisher and then source location, I want it to point back to where that has object call was in the post, so it's easy to find where it's actually coming from. So that's the trick I'm doing here, which is where Ruby has this capability of getting all the stack you're in, where each method call you just put a new frame on the stack and so forth. That's what happens when you throw an exception. You have this whole that shows everywhere you've been and so forth. So what we're doing here is we're telling Ruby I want the frame before we were called, and then I just want one frame, and then it returns an array, so we have to call first. So it'll point back to where, it will actually point to here where has object was called. So that's the trick for it. And then for each of these, I'm just calling them chunks, for each of these names, I want to then convert them into an array. In case there's just, you only pass one, which would happen if you do this. If you just do that, I think. No, that will probably, maybe I could actually skip the array because I'm doing a star. Anyway, and then I'm concatenating everything into just one array of strings because we're yielding to this block. So we get all these strings returned, but it just becomes one array of strings. And then from these source chunks we now have, we can then join them in with like I'm just like putting some new lines in as well. And then we're pointing back to the file and the line number, which will be that line. So again, a lot of stuff is going on in here. I mean, you can pass it into class eval. So you also, that's how you get, so if you pass multiple in, you just get those method definitions kind of in one. So a bunch of stuff is going on there. And then let's see what else we can do. So this is the kind of like the tricky code where we have to do this for object shapes to assign a hash and then put it in a key and yada yada.
Is there a way in Active Record to, because with the object shapes, again, if nobody calls the publisher method, this array would never be called. So
yes.
We destroy the shape anyway. And again, the hash is a great thing because we can always add to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a way to inject the hash the moment the Active Record
Well, so what we do is we actually do this here. We're overriding this internal Active Record recall this when you initialize an active. So we're trying to preserve so it's always in the same order.
Okay, and you set it to null because you don't want to take the RAM and otherwise.
Yes, but we have to declare. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to declare the object shape first. Yeah, it's an internal method. So that's one tricky bit in this stuff. But it's an optimization thing essentially. So, and then Active Record sets a whole bunch of instance variables in its internals as well when it goes through and calls this. So that's the trick we have to do for that memory optimization essentially. So you don't because Active Records can have a whole bunch of different, instance variables, all kinds of stuff. So we're trying to reduce the amount of object shapes that it has. So.
And even if the associated object is known, the shape of the object is still the same. And
yeah.
When it's called, you make it as a hash. So if you don't ever call it, actually you pay almost no price.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's that. Hopefully not. And then I'm using this extend source from, again, passing in the same names, but now I'm trying to do that. This is what I talk about when you forward those callbacks, because you can also pass them in as this options hash where you have, what was it in a readme? Do I have that somewhere? Was it after save? What did I call it? Oh, it's this whole thing. So you pass them something like after touch. I'm just saying, oh, you want to call after touch on this publisher and forward that callback on. Or if you want to call something else where you then, or you want to hijack in here and prevent something. So it's akin to writing these 3 lines essentially. Not saying people should use it, but I just thought this is kind of interesting to see what that would look like again in the idea with this is to find these collaborator objects. So you want to have a sense of what the life cycle is like. But
this might be very useful. For example, if you say, let's say I have like sorting object. That's for like,
Yeah.
I make my object sortable and I want
Yeah.
to delegate, okay, I'm creating this object before create.
Yeah.
So you set the number of the object, like, oh, that's your own position 0, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, 5, so you can.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why we have two calls of the extend source?
Yeah.
Why? Okay.
Yeah, because I wanted to separate them out, what we're doing with them.
Okay, so it's like.
Yeah, so
if
you just.
something blows up, you want to.
Yeah, it's just, it's like here we're defining all the methods first, and then later on defining all the callbacks, because otherwise we'd have to do extend source from and then loop over what we need to do, the callbacks into, I guess, or something. It just seemed a little bit cleaner to repeat it, kind of.
Yeah, otherwise you have to just combine them.
Yeah. I guess what would that look like? Yeah, we'd have to do a begin around this and then
Yeah, just
map them in there,
like
but.
a string, like a big string which says def, and you just.
Yeah.
Callbacks.
Or I think you'd have to pass in like a result or something, and then you'd have to do like result and then append back and forth. So it just seemed cleaner to just. Oh, that makes sense, but it's kind of library code. Let's see. Let me clean this out. And yeah, that's where we're looping through. So if it's true, we're just saying, oh, you just want to pass the same callback on, and so forth. And this looks kind of weird, but it's just defining what is it like after save. And then passing in the block. So we do publisher dot, what is it like, after touch, I think I call it numbers. But this is kind of what it's doing. So that's why it looked weird. But it works because we're passing it into class eval. So what is it? Class eval, like basically this is kind of what it's doing. And it works, weirdly enough. Cool. So that's sort of it for what this thing does. Yeah. That's this part. What are we doing? Okay, we're doing okay. Any questions so far, or what's new? So it's meant to just be complementary. It's meant to be a fairly lightweight convention that if you want to put them in there, you can do it. Actually, I should show you. I was just playing around with this the other day. Where was it? Oh, that's Rubinica. Here it was. So on Ruby Video, if you've seen that, where both Adrian, who's writing in here, Adrian and Marco are trying to like index a whole bunch of rooters from all kinds of.
So much,
Yeah. They're doing a ton of different stuff.
On my website, actually, I would probably have to implement it, but I think they're doing very good.
Yeah, and Mark.
This event is there.
Yeah. Marco added it, and I yeah.
Now we have done the videos in there.
Yeah. So let's see here. So what's this? Oh, here. So Adrian was playing around with this because he's also using another. I don't think we have time to go into this other one, but I have another gem that's also interacting with all this, like because of the conventions that are being set up, where you can pass this Poro into a job. I can have some extra gem that can then condense some other logic where you're generating jobs, but it's a whole other thing. But he was playing around with this where he had what was he doing before? He was just calling a job directly, and then what was he doing? They're calling it again here, and it sort of fetched this blue sky metadata internally, but then he swapped it over to using this associated object of like having an idea for a profile enhancer that could then do stuff with it. So, oh wait, I should probably boost the font size a little bit. Yeah. Let's see. And so he's replacing it with this essentially, where this is the perform stuff that we don't. This is another gem, but we don't. It's just generating a job essentially. Think of it like that. And so now the logic is collected a little bit more in one place. It's not quite embedded in the whole speaker, but it's kind of a little bit easier to interact with because now you could both call this directly if you want to, or it could have a job that this is what this does. It generates a enhance all later method, so you can just have it done in a job for you. So Adrian was doing this, and then I was playing around with extending or playing around with a little bit what it would look like if we do some extra things. Let's see, what did I do? Should we step through the commits? Maybe we should. Around the API a little bit. I removed the bangs because I didn't feel like I did a whole bunch. And I tried to split it up so we have several jobs as opposed to one. Oh, this is also super small font size. Let's see what happens. Can I bump this a little bit? Tried to play around with a different name. If we just thought of this as like having a general profiles object, it can do because it's trying to pull data from like GitHub or Blue Sky for these speaker pages essentially. It's just playing around with naming, so it's not doing a bunch. And then I think I had some things I forgot because the kind of time I wrote this. Yeah, that was one error thing. Let's see. I've also got to remember to rename it. So what else are we doing? Okay, wait. This is a whole other thing. I was playing around with like a wrapper around. They're using Minisky and so I'm playing around with a lightweight wrapper for it, so you can then add some extra domain methods to it. So this is also kind of weird, but it just simplified some stuff in the, you can see we're leaking less data in the speaker object itself. So now we can do, like, have this blue sky profile metadata.
Using the blue sky to be this external wrapper for the gem.
Yeah, so now I'm calling, I'm sorry, what?
Is that the same constant or is that not a constant like blue sky?
Yeah, blue sky here. So it's being set up here. Let's see. Oh, there's a bunch of comments. Can I hide them?
Okay,
Yeah, so I'm assigning it here, and then I'm doing another Ruby thing. I don't think we have time to go into it, but so and doing some extra things around this. But it's basically just to get. We're assigning it to an instance of this delegate class as well. So it's a whole lot of.
It's like a common safe thing for the external.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's a reminder of it's kind of similar to what you were doing with extend self, because I'm assigning it to an instance of the class I'm defining in the block. So again, I like this sort of weird stuff. Maybe it's a little bit too much, but I just wanted to see what they thought about it, and then there might be some issue with reloading and stuff. So I haven't gone back to that yet, but okay. Yeah, and then you can still, the idea with having delegating these two methods back to the class instances that you can have, because we're assigning it to an instance. So if we delegate back to the class, you can then still generate other clients off of this, but you can still have a nicer API where you can just call it on this constant. So you have the general client. I hope that makes sense, but yeah.
Online to, no,
yeah.
Actually that's deleted. So
Oh, that's the that's the delete. Yeah.
It was deleted.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so that was a whole lot of tangent. Let's see, was there anything else we want to show in here? Load, please. Oh, and then there's a testing rewritten, and then I was fiddling around. Oh, I didn't think I'd push that. Let's see. Yeah, I was playing around with some other stuff too. This is a whole lot of, but now we're going deep into tangents. I don't think this is helpful anymore. Let's see. Anything else? So we had the last one. That was the last one. Okay, let's skip this part for now. This is the other part. Okay. So do we want to go to, I think we want to go, okay. So let's wrap up this part now, and then I want to go to another one. Yeah, so I just thought it was interesting that Adrian was like, oh, I kind of like what this looks like when you're using it and so forth. So take it for what it's worth. Let's see. So another thing I've been playing around with is this thing called Oken, where in Rails apps, typically when people are trying to set up their test data, they're either using fixtures or factory bot. And I've worked on systems that use kind of one or the other, where factories will kind of optimize for isolation in a way. So that's kind of nice when you start out and everything, but you're not rebuilding the entire world. And I found it difficult to work with over time because it's like, oh, I'm putting these 5 factories together and I can make the test pass, but I don't know what's happening because everything is kind of anonymous and regenerated. But then on the fixture side, you end up with, I should show this to you in the code exactly, because I've actually set it up in here. Okay. So there's a little bit of context to work on here. Let's see, where is it in the test dummy? Where is it? And test fixtures, yeah. So what happens where if you use fixtures, you have to do like one file per table. So you have an accounts table, you do one file for that and start building up like an object graph essentially. So then you can have things that interact on this, like users, where you can have a specific user and then it's pointing back to the account. And so you'd see over here on the side, okay, I can't make this, can I make this side larger? I don't know why I can't do that. But you'd have to like go through all these different files for these. There isn't really a ton of associations in here, but you still have to throw through a whole bunch of them to see what's going on in here. And that's just for 5 or 6 different associations. But in a real app, it's going to be a lot larger. So it's kind of difficult to figure out what's going on. But what I find that's kind of what I like about fixtures is that there's an attempt to do a little bit more of a storytelling aspect, so you can kind of see what the object graph is. The only problem is you have to construct it yourself and going through all these files. So it's like kind of error prone. So I was curious to see what that would look like to change that up. So did I put that in a README? Let's see. Okay, that's kind of big. Let's see. So here's the alternative that I'm trying to do. I'm actually trying to start out from seeds as well, so you can kind of set up your development data and then you reuse that in tests, so you're sharing the same data across the two. Hopefully the idea is that then the data you see in your browser is then the same data you test with, so that it's easier for newcomers to figure out what's going on in an app, and you can kind of see how the object graph is built up. You can see the root level model, like an account, for instance, and then what starts being built on top of that, the next level ones like users, they're attached to the account here. You can have users on multiple accounts, and how I sketch this up. And then from then on, you could start setting up the next level models from that, where you didn't, now I have a menu, it's just, a bogus one of like running a donut shop or whatever. So then you have a menu, and then you have menu items where you can then put a price on it and so forth, and you create some extra users that then build orders on that, so you keep building it up bit by bit. And so you could have this file that's meant to be more like, almost like the routes file is, where it's just going longer vertically. And that's kind of okay, because you're just trying to tell a bit of a story of how things are built up. So that's sort of the idea. Let's see if I also want to do, and then there's a bunch of stuff I'm trying to figure out with like default attributes, so you could have them kind of globally, where you could then set some like default. So here it would be that any object that has a name would automatically pull from this, so you don't have to put in values that you don't care about within these seeds. You slim it down a little bit. That's the idea, and then you can also scope them to a specific table essentially. Let's see, and then you can you can reuse the same data in your tests essentially. So you can have, what's the other thing we're doing? Do I mention the RSpec as well? Okay, let's see, fixtures converter installation, that's the development part. What does I want to look for? Let's see. Oh yeah, and then this stuff works with out of the box with db seed and db seed replant, where you then truncate all the data that's in there and rerun seeds essentially. Let's see. I set up some data there. What is I was looking for now? I lost track of what it was. Oh yeah, I think it was like the file naming conventions, where you can then have, I mentioned it somewhere. Yeah, here's where it is. So we'd look up in, basically you'd start out setting this up, open up in db seeds instead. You run this prepare block, and you tell it what kind of things to seed. So here Open would look for, it would start looking in db seeds, and then for what's in the current environment as well. So you could have seeds that are used across every environment kind of, and then also just for test or just for development, so you can split them up. So here this one would be shared between local and test. And there's a little bit of like, do you want to run some of this in production potentially? I know some people run some seeds in production, so I still have to figure that story out. But there's potential where some of that could maybe work. It's a little bit more experimental right now. So let's see, what's the time we got? Should we try to look through some of the code? Maybe. I wonder if this might be a little bit, anything else?
How do you test something like that? Is it like, how do you...
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, good point. Yeah, good point. Let's see that. I think, where did I put that? Test fixtures, let's close, no, you know what, no. Here, models. Yeah, so basically what it is when you do, what is it? Here. So when you do something like this, where you pass in a symbol, that means you're exposing on the testing side. You can do accounts.Kasper's Donuts, for instance. So that's what this is doing here. You can refer back to them essentially, so you get them as method objects. And I think we'll raise as well if you haven't defined that. So you'll start throwing errors if you miss the data object you expect somewhere. And then there's some other tests in here. Yeah, showing the access and everything, and how you can access the object and something else. Respond to that.
But they're created in advance, right?
Sort of. They're actually created ad hoc. So we're kind of
So
mapping them.
Lazy.
Yeah, it's kind of lazy, yeah.
Can you override some of the values?
Which one?
Can you override some of the data on the object?
Yeah.
If I want to use specific name for a specific test?
Yes. Let's see. If I understand it correctly, let's see if I have a test for that. This is again the stuff I was talking about, the other gem, where we want to point the source location back to where it was coming from, so you don't end up pointing into my library, but I want to show you where something was defined. Let's see what you were saying. Let's see. Is this what you mean?
Is this doing update query now?
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're relying on...
So just to make it clear, so if you call users.Kasper,
yeah.
So this is doing the insert?
No, that's already been done, because that's been run. So basically in testing, we run the shared seeds before everything. So it's run once, exactly, yes.
So
I forgot to mention that.
You never start with the empty database. So you always have...
Yes, so you're working off that consistent set of data essentially. So that's loaded ahead of time. And then also it works with parallel testing. So for each of those test databases you do, we also seed that. So you have the same data, the shared data, but then you can, this is also relying on Rails is having transactions around tests. So you can still update data if you need to internally, but then it gets rolled back afterwards. Yeah. I completely forgot to mention that. Okay, glad you mentioned that. There's a lot of tricky parts to all this stuff. But yeah, I think that's kind of the gist of it. At least what I'm trying to do to sort of, yeah, go ahead.
Are you using this in production apps or something like that?
Technically, I don't have it right now, but there's a few people that I know that are using it. Like there's a...
because I'm very interested to hear actually about some of the experience.
Yes.
People who
Yeah.
like tests using that.
Yeah, so full disclaimer, Thomas is a friend of mine, but he's... wait, we should show this on the README. That's a little bit closer because the way to render it. But Thomas is really glad about this. He's really happy with it. So he swears by it for all kinds of different stuff that he's doing with it. And he's introduced it on a client project he worked with as well, where they also liked it. Flipper was also thinking about maybe using it. Weirdly enough, I got like 3 pull requests in the past 2 days, which hasn't really happened. You can see here. No, it's within the past 2 days. I have got almost no pull request on this thing, and then within the like 1 day before having to talk about it, I started receiving some. So more people are starting to use it. There's also, I haven't linked it in a README, but you can find it on a Ruby video. Maybe you should find that while we're here. What was it? Contribute? Yeah, let's see. Can I find him here? Julian? Oh, is it not? Do I need to do the, wait, how do we find that? Australia Ruby? Yeah, Ruby, what if we do open? Oh, that's me I did a similar one for like, about the stuff at a Turkey Ruby meetup. Where was the other one? There's a, there was an Australian Ruby meetup where, Julian was talking about this. Sorry? Oh yeah, that's probably right. Is that Sydney.rb? Is it Sydney? It's not Sydney, right? No, it's Sydney. Okay. Where is it? I know I posted about it somewhere, but okay. Shoot. Speakers. Let's see. Can we find it on a J? Let's do. We can find. I think we can. Not found. What? Which is now I'm just hunting for. Okay. What is? Oh, we need to load. It's lazy loaded. There we go. Okay. Where are we? Not there. There. Julian. Where is it? Is it not on here? I feel like I saw it on here somewhere. There we go. Okay, it's not there. But Julian did a talk at an Australian Ruby meetup on this as well, where he was looking through it and trying to experiment with it as well. Yeah, and weirdly enough, like the download number started shooting up after this, so that was very nice. So more people are trying it out. But yeah, it's still early days because it's kind of doing a lot of things slightly differently. So yeah, I'm still kind of curious for more people to try to use it, and it's a little bit more ambitious than the other stuff. Yeah, I think is that kind of what's the timing? I don't remember. I think we have been going for almost 40 minutes. So, any other questions? I know I kind of went fast on some of these things, but I don't think we have time to go through the code. Maybe.
It's interesting because you have data already seeded in the tests, and
yeah,
that sometimes can interfere with the tests. Maybe
yeah, that's also true. So that's yeah. Go ahead.
Is that you get faster execution time.
Yes, it's a hard problem. Even if you're just using fixtures, that was the issue that was tough with them, where that line between where you that's another thing I should probably show you with that. That's kind of wild with this stuff. But I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I don't know how to have like conventions around that yet, because it's kind of a tricky problem, and it's different for every app for how much do they want to share and how much do they want to like leave up to separate tests or whatnot. I was talking to someone else about this, where she was pointing out that it might be nice to have some of this set up for integration tests, where then you don't have to care about it. I'm just signing in as this user, and then I know I have some basic things set up, so I can just run through my test there. But then in unit tests, she'd still want to use something like FactoryBot or whatever to then build it up. And I completely forgot this too, because it's a whole bunch. Yeah, go ahead.
With somebody, what they were thinking was you use fixtures to make like skeleton accounts, like account with projects, with tasks,
yeah,
with free, try, whatever. and then you still use factory bot to just populate the specific domains you care about.
Yeah.
Because one of the issue with the fixtures is you create, let's say, a task, and it creates a user, it creates a project, it creates an account, it creates like a billing,
Yeah.
and basically the whole tree blows up. And
Yes.
you just want to say, I want uncompleted task.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's the difficult part where, and that's going to be different for every domain. That's what I'm kind of hoping with having this like structure that's laid out makes it a little bit clearer of when things are added. So it's like hopefully a little bit easier to not balloon that. But
Yeah,
you know,
like,
it's
like here you can say I have like free account, paid account, expired.
Yes.
Like, and you have this all set up. You have a users, John, Jane, whatever,
Yes.
whatever, and
Yeah.
then in the test you can still use like factories to now
Yeah,
I'm
tweak
using
things.
like a task for a project, and I already know there is like a project.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Where was I just before? It was another, what was it, C server? Yeah. So here's another thing that's on, I'm trying to blend fixtures and factories a little bit together. So this is kind of nuts too. There's, in Ruby, there's, you could do, what is it, like you could do object, and then you could do, let's do object.new, and then you could do dot something, and then you can say like equal to true, and then it'll only be on that instance of this object. And so that's kind of what's happening here, where I'm grabbing, since I have a reference to this like user's object, I can define extra methods on it. And when you do this, you can actually use super to go back into it. So I'm doing a whole, and again, endless method definition as well. It's just to see whether or not it works. And you can make some extra helpers as well. So these are actually available within tests as well, exposed in there. So it's again a way of trying to blend it a little bit more. I'm not sure how much I like it, but it's just interesting that it kind of just worked, and I don't have really to add any extra methods to it. And it's called singleton methods. So this is kind of the pattern. It's different from the singleton pattern, but this is what they're called, these methods, because it's on the singleton or something like that. Yeah. Let's see what else. I kind of want to show you I kind of want to show you just the section part here. Another thing I've been trying to explore is this method is purely decorative. All it does is just, it's meant to just help you carve out like a file like this to help explain a little bit more instead of doing it in comments, because there's a lot of people trying to do that with comments, but it just gets lost, at least for me. So this is actually not too difficult. This is it. I'm just using all of Ruby's built-in method syntax to help do it, and then it sort of just works. So it's just meant to be purely decorative, essentially. But because there's so much flexibility to Ruby's method signatures, you can kind of get away with doing something kind of bonkers like this. It just sort of works. So you can do your own setup for what you want, like, what is it like? Yeah, I'm showing these off. Like you can pass in the symbols, you could pass in like a keyword argument as well or whatnot for your own organization, or you can just have it take a block. And you could nest it deeply too, because it just keeps yielding, but it's still in the same scope as well. So I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool, that just works. But again, don't know if it's a good idea, but I just thought it was cool to leverage all of that flexibility Ruby gives you out of the box and just seeing what that looks like. So for me, it's a lot about exploring and trying to write it out first and then seeing if I like it or not. That's kind of the point. Cool. I think that's kind of what I had, just running through it. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, again, I'm at the business. Great. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's off topic, I guess, but what happened with the comments? Did you just hide them and show them? Or
Oh, where?
editor feature, or you opened another file? Because we saw the same file but without the comments.
Oh, did we? Did I hit that or whatnot? I don't remember where that was.
Yeah,
I think I scrolled up before. Yeah. I just scrolled up.
Yeah, actually, one question for the associated object.
Yeah.
Is there a way to have associated object that's not following the naming convention? Like my idea is I want to have an object which is, let's say, so-called sorter. And this is an associated object to it can be associated to many classes because, for example, it deals with sorting records or
Right.
positioning and things like that. Is there a way, because a lot of the extension logic kind of depends on the naming?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I talked about it a little bit, and I've tried to explore it a few times, but it's kind of, in a way, the irony is I really want the namespace to be there so that it gets some of that organization, perhaps. But So it's kind of a little bit tricky.
Yeah, because there is a lot of potential for those
Yes.
to help being like organizing things.
Yeah.
Because, for example, has one basically is one of these things.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be like, again, one hack you can do is you can just create like a sorter object and just inherit it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Well, it's tricky because the way I'm defining it on what is like these, I'm using inherited to start.
you can include it.
So
Like you can say
Yeah.
publisher just include it, and or you
Yeah.
can say what you can do some your object can inherit from this and
Yeah.
then you blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
that was one thing we were talking about. So what you were talking about was doing. Well, I'm just gonna keep using the. You said sort of.
Yeah,
I'm
let's
just gonna
say
use.
publisher.
Yeah, you could try to do. No, actually, it would probably be like module publisher or something, and then maybe that's a concern or whatnot. And then you have for each of the objects you want to actually support, you have to do that, and then include the top level version.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tricky.
Yeah, or maybe you do like associate object, like maybe you do like post publisher equal to associated object from.
Right. Yeah. And maybe something like that. Yeah, that could
because
make
for
work.
like library stuff, it can be very useful to kind of replace something
Yeah.
on somewhere.
Yeah.
Because with the extensions you can and the callbacks you can do a lot of like, okay, I want something to like do publishing or
Yeah.
trashing or.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, I like the idea of assigning that. Okay. Was there anything else I wanted to show with this? Yeah, but that's some of the stuff I've been exploring, and I kind of like where some of this is heading, and now people are starting to pick it up a little bit, so that's interesting to see what they think about it. Yeah. Cool. I think that's kind of what I had. Any other questions? Cool, perfect. Hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I kind of like just like diving in and like I kind of like throwing people into the deep end, and then once you get used to being blasted with source files, it's like, oh, this is not too bad. And like, well, I mean, you're not going to understand everything at first go, but just comes a lot easier. So, yeah. Cool. Thank you.